I'm Rosie. Welcome to Rosy Hardy Gardening. Today we're going to do the July questions and answers. Please remember there is a comments box on the videos, and if you like them or you would like to have a question answered, then please do put those questions in there. Also, if you do enjoy our videos, please do subscribe to the channel. I have a question here about Santolina Chamisa. That is the silver leafed one, and this lady, it's in its first year, it's finished flowering, she's dead-headed it, but what it is doing is falling over in the centre. She's very nervous and scared about pruning it, thinking that she may end up with a few dead sticks. Well, Santolina is one of those plants which puts out a lot of growth. You have these wonderful yellow flowers on the top and then they go over, and a lot of people just deadhead it. That's absolutely fine, but if it has become too big, it does this splaying over and you get a horrible shape. And what you need to do is you need to look into the center of the plant and you will see lovely new shoots growing, and that is how far down you want to be cutting it. You want to be cutting it right down. So we're talking about going down to about 4 or 5 centimeters of right the way down, so you're making it that height. It will then bush up and be the most beautiful ever-grey shrub for you through the rest of the year. So don't be frightened, cut it back and then get it to grow much better. My Companionphylla has flowered profusely in the early summer. Now it looks almost dead and has rust on the stems. What am I doing wrong? Well, Geraldine, you're not doing anything wrong. Companionphylla flowers in a really good flush really early on in the year, but it does not continue on flowering. You've got to deadhead, cut back and allow it to put on new growth. If you've left it there and you've got all these horrible stems and you've now got rust on the leaf, that's because it's gone into stress. So cut off everything. Make sure that you bag and bin any of that old material that has got rust on it. You do not want to be putting that onto your compost heap, because otherwise you will be spreading it around the garden. So bag it and bin it, cut it right down. Give it a bucket of water if you're in a very dry area with a little bit of liquid feed. Something like tomato feed or maxi crop will be very, very good. And then see the plant grow back up, look green, look healthy, and it will put on a few more flowers a bit later on in the season. If you'd done this much earlier, you would have now had a second flush of flowers. But don't worry, do it now and you should then get some secondary flowering on your plant. I've got another one here. It says, how does one create the perfect setting for Eramuras? If you don't know what Eramuras are, they're not quite a bulb, they're not quite a corm. They come with a large central snout, which is sort of like corm, with long, dark brown to black roots, and they look like an octopus really, and they grow out quite flat. They come from Eastern Europe through Turkey and China, so they come from very dry Mediterranean areas. So they need a free draining soil. So what you need to do to make them actually plant them is you need to create a really good area with a good amount of grit, put them down in that. They also like a bit of food, but they do not want to be waterlogged. They look fantastic mixed with other Mediterranean plants. They go well with grasses, they go well with Gauras, they look very, very good with even things like calendula, etc. But it is that free draining which is key to them. You can grow them in a container. If you grow them in a container, you'll find that their roots are really quite wide and you need to just gently bend them down, put them into a big enough pot, and you can grow them on like that and then plant them out into your garden if you're worried that your garden is a little bit too wet. This is from someone who lives in Finland, and he cannot leave his Gaura outside for the winter. He's grown Gaura from seed in the spring, now in the border. In order to save them from overwinter, I suppose I have to dig them up and pot them on. How would you advise me to get them through the winter? Temperature, light, water requirements. Yes, certainly in Finland you will not be able to keep your Gaura over winter outside, that is for sure. You can collect a bit of seed from your plants if they do actually set seed and grow some more from seed next year. They won't always be as good quality plants if you do it that way. You can take cuttings and overwinter cuttings inside. That means that they don't take up as much space as potting up the big plant. If you are going to pot up the big plant, then once it's finished its last flush of flowers, cut it to half height, lift it, pot it into a container that has got good free draining soil, and then put it into a greenhouse where there is available light, because it is deciduous, so it will lose all its leaves, so it doesn't need to be under bright lights all the time. And then keep it moist but not overwatered. So I would put it onto a tray or onto gravel area and water from the base. And then in the spring, probably with you around about April time, you will find that you'll start to get shoots at the bottom of the plant. You can cut all of the dead growth back down, start watering it with a little bit of feed, and then once it is suitable to be planted back outside again, you can do that. If you are doing cuttings, do the cuttings in quite a free draining compost and leave them in their cutting cells or cutting trays through the winter, and then pot them up in the end of March, beginning of April, giving them as much available light as you possibly can. Hopefully that helps. Right, we've got a lady here who is from US Zone 9A. Now this is quite an extreme zone. It's very different from what we hear in the UK. She's got Gaura that look really, really good in the beginning, but once the summer heat hit, it is not looking that good, and it has lots of stems but no flowers. What is the problem? She hasn't got a variety, but it is a solid pink, so it could be any of the pink varieties. It doesn't really matter. In USA Zone 9A, you have a minimum temperature of between 20 and 30 Fahrenheit. For those of you who are in centigrade, that is -6 to -1, so it's not really very cold, but you get extreme heat in the summer. And a lot of these herbaceous perennials have learnt to grow really, really well in the conditions when it's good. And then when it gets to the extreme heat, they suddenly go into a summer dormancy and then come back. So if it has happened like that, I would suggest you cutting the plant to half height, and then when the conditions get better in the autumn, you will find that it will come back up and flower for you then. Hopefully that will help you. Right, I've got somebody here asking me about Italian cypress. Now, Italian cypress are those really tall, thin ones, and to keep them in that shape, you do need to prune them, and you need to give them a little tidy up prune. So if any of their branches sort of flop out a bit, you give them a cut back, but you only cut back to where it is green. You do not cut into old growth. They will not regrow from old growth. So this person's one has gone brown, and he's asking whether or not, or I can't remember whether it's a male or female, sorry. So they are asking whether or not they can cut the whole plant down to encourage new growth. I'm sorry, but with these cypress, if you cut into old growth, they will not regrow. So if it has just gone brown at the ends, you can cut back to anything that is green. If they are completely brown right the way through, they're losing all of their needles, then I'm sorry, you need to cut it down, dig it out and start again. Okay. This one is about sea holly or eryngium and is saying that it's gone floppy. How can I get the stems to be a little bit stronger? If they go floppy, it's one of two things. Either they are getting too much water and in a little bit of too much shade, or they've got a little bit too much food. So what I would suggest is making sure that they are in a slightly drier condition and they are not being fed so well. That is the main things I would suggest. You can't do that in the growing season as it's happened because it's already put up its growth. So once they have finished their flowering, cut that back. You may need to divide the plant and then put one bit into a slightly sunnier, slightly drier conditions, and that should then help. This one is somebody who lives in Kent, that is in the south of England, and they've got squirrels in their gardening and asking how can you get rid of them. Well, in the south of England we have a problem with grey squirrels, and unfortunately there's not very many ways in which you can stop them coming into the garden. One way is by having your own animals in there. They don't tend to like being where there are dogs or cats quite so much, but if you're not somebody who's a pet owner, that's a little bit difficult. Otherwise, if you're feeding things like birds, etc., just feed them in one end of the garden, because the squirrels are attracted to those areas. They're also attracted to bulbs if you put bulbs into the garden. So I would suggest growing your bulbs in containers and putting those containers somewhere shut away so that squirrels can't get at them. And then once those bulbs have started and come into the green, you will find you can plant them out and the squirrels won't attack them then. Hopefully that does help. We're going around the world in this question and answer session today, so now we're going to Australia. And this person is a cool zone and has a cherry tree that suffered very, very badly with pear and cherry slug, and is asking what can be used as a preventative measure in the winter to stop another outbreak in the spring. So what they call cherry slug is actually the grub from a sawfly, and it is a fruit tree sawfly. And they're horrible little grubs that look a little bit like elongated slugs, and they just devastate the foliage and the flowers on your fruit trees. Now, the sawfly has various stages, and basically this is the last stage before it pupates and drops off and goes into the soil and then reappears as the sawfly that then lays its eggs on the actual, or it can climb up the stem of the tree. So what you need to do is you need to make sure around the bottom of the tree where they are going to go back into the soil that you actually put some deterrent, and you can use chalk powder, you can use flour, any of those sorts of things. They don't like that. You can also get you used to be able to, and I don't know whether you can in Australia, you can get what are known as grease strips that you put around the actual stem of the tree. That will help. Or you can use some sort of oil around the stem, and that will stop things going up. Watch out for them and get rid of them. You can hose the tree down completely and actually get all of those grubs off when they are a light infestation. Otherwise, wait until all the leaf has dropped, gather that up, get rid of that, but also, as I say, talcum powder, chalk powder around the base actually helps quite well with stopping these grubs from getting up because it dries them out. Hopefully that will help you in some way to restricting what you get in the way of sawfly. The last two questions are from a regular viewer, and he has asked, he's bought some begonias which are non-stop flowering, and he's wondering whether he's correct when they finish flowering, whether he dries off the corms and starts them again in March. That is absolutely correct. You can just let the container that they are in dry out and just store that in a shed or under the shelf in a greenhouse. That's absolutely fine. Do not water them through the winter and then restart them. Or you can depot, get them all dry and put them into newspaper or something like that, somewhere where they're not going to be attacked by rodents is the key thing with that. And then in March, repot them up and start them again. That is very, very easy. The second question is about Delphiniums and wanting to grow some dwarf plants. There are two ways of doing this. One, you can actually get plants that only grow to a smaller height, and there are quite a lot of the newer breeding ones, such as the Paramo types, which have been bred to be slightly shorter. There are some seed-raised dwarfer series as well. But the other thing to do is you can actually, as the plants are growing and putting up their first lot of flower stems, you can actually take them down and get them to produce secondary flower stems, and those will then be shorter. Hopefully that will help you. Now, you are asking whether or not to get the plugs in February. I would suggest that's a little bit early unless you have got lights and you've got heating in a greenhouse. The light levels in February are not that good, so I would always recommend starting off plants like this in probably mid to late March, and then the light levels are better and you won't have to use quite so much heating in your greenhouse. Hopefully that helps. If you have found this question and answer session helpful, then please do remember to put comments in the comments box and please subscribe to the channel. Thank you.